Well, good morning. It's Wednesday morning. You're listening to Prepper Talk Radio with the Prepared Guy and Mr. PrepperCon here, and we've got our special guest, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Survival Medical, John Roberts. How you doing, big guy?
Doing good, man. How you doing?
Doing good. So glad to have you in studio. It's always fun.
Yes, absolutely.
It was an awesome drive down from Idaho this morning. Gorgeous sunrise in the mountains. It was awesome.
Yeah? You were up at, what, 4:20?
I left the house at a little after 4 a.m.
So did you get up and just drive just to be here for this, or are you in town for another reason?
I got a couple things, but
Okay.
you guys are my favorite. You're the
All right,
real
cool.
reason.
So
you're the real reason.
I appreciate that.
I always love to hear that we're the favorite. Well, we've got a fun show today. I mean, we actually have our sponsor in studio, and he's the founder and CEO of Survival Medical. Survival Medical is the kit that I carry in my car. I actually had my car cleaned yesterday professionally to try to get rid of the prior owner smell, and they took out my survival kits and put them in this garbage bag. I'm like, whoa. So I had to undo that and put it all back. I'm like, cover-up kit goes here under the seat. Voyager goes over here. I was making sure all my kits were in the right spot so that I could just reach and I know they'd be there. But I'm kind of OCD about those types of things. Love having you here. Love your product. Where can we get Survival Medical right now?
The best place right now is actually going to be survival-medical.com. If your listeners want to save some money, I'll give a special checkout code. It's going to be Thrifty, THRIFTY, when you go to checkout. That'll save you 15%. We're not in any Sam's Club here in Utah at the moment, so that's going to be the best place. That's survival-medical.com.
Love it. And remember, that's Thrifty, THRIFTY. Now, today we've got a fun topic. This is one of my favorite topics, prepper groups, right? Everyone thinks, hey, I can go, well, not everyone. A lot of people have this misbelief that when the crap hits the fan, they can lone wolf it, which is to take care of things on their own. Highly unlikely you're going to survive. The reason is you can't do everything that needs to be done.
I think there's one caveat there in that if you're all by yourself and you're maybe former military, you have lots of training, you could possibly survive by yourself if you don't have any other responsibilities.
Depending on what's going on. For example.
And where you're at.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
For example, think back at all the mountain men days, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many mountain men died because they got injured and had no one to help them?
Yep.
They couldn't get through. They couldn't perform surgery on themselves, right? There are absolute benefits to groups. Sharing the workload is one of my favorites. Number one is security. You can have somebody on watch all the time if you have a large enough group and if everyone's trained correctly. But there's always power in groups. If you're going to take it from a religious standpoint, look at the history of the Bible. They always caravanned in groups.
Mm-hmm.
When the Exodus happened, it wasn't three guys leaving, Egypt and saying, "All right, we're going to go start New Jerusalem. We're going to do this, and we're going to, get things going again." No, it was
millions
of people. Now we don't have that option right now because I don't trust millions of people.
Yeah, that too. I was going to say.
But we can have prepper groups, and we can talk about the ideal sizes and makeups of those groups. But today we also want to talk about how to kind of start up your own group or find a group to partner with. And so that's why we brought John in. You've lived completely off grid. You're one of the big guys in the prepping industry for understanding how to do a lot of things on your own and how to find people with good skills. Just your background in back to the landing, living off grid, doing everything with a small group. You know more than most people of the realities and the dangers of trying to be all by yourself.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time thinking I could do the lone wolf thing or just me and my family. Lived for close to a decade in the remote mountains of Oregon, and quickly realized in that setting that there were certain things that couldn't get done, and the inherent safety issues for trying to stand alone as an individual family unit. If I was to get hurt, which happened a couple times, things didn't get done.
Yeah.
And, we were living high in the Cascade Mountains. So we went through 7 cords of wood every winter. If there had been a severe injury or something like that, it could have been really life-threatening if it was a long-term off-grid situation where I couldn't have got other places.
Yeah.
And so I quickly learned in that scenario. Originally, my concept as a preparedness-minded individual was to just go somewhere far enough away I didn't have to worry about a lot of the threats, and have a back the land kind of lifestyle. And in doing so, realized the value in having a group.
Absolutely. Now, Shane,
Yes.
what's been your take on preparedness? The whole time you've been doing this, what's been your take on groups?
Well, my take may be a little bit different, in that I am right now. I've been more focused on kind of urban setting type of survival group, where John is definitely more off-grid, more rural. And I honestly, I would love to get there, but reality for me is that, I live on the edge of town. I don't live, it's still quite populated, and I've kind of situated myself to where I have quick access to, the mountains and canyon to get out of immediate danger if it need be, if that's the case. But definitely my perspective may be a little bit different, and I see as I already have a built-in group.
Yeah.
But
who's your built-in group? Like, what does that consist of?
Well, first and foremost, my immediate family. Secondarily,
All of them? You like all of them that much?
well, yes, yes, I do. And so my immediate family, but then extending
Honesty
to my
is the best policy, Shane.
Exactly. Yes, I love all of my family equally. So, and my immediate family who's in the house under the roof, and then that extends to brothers, sisters, brothers-in-law, sisters, and so forth. So that's what I looking at right now as my immediate prepper group, or MAG, I guess, as it's referred to, mutual assistance group. Depending on however you want to refer to it, community. I'd like the word community.
Community makes more sense to me.
Exactly.
The reality is none of us have all the skill sets we need to survive. So you have to have some type of community to work with to get through whatever's going on. And I find it interesting, if you jump on social media, you can find a lot of different groups. If you go to the website forums, you can find a lot of different groups that they kind of have their protocols for creating a group. And there's usually kind of like a company commander, some type of person that's in charge, that kind of makes the rules. I'm more of a governing body type of group. I would like to have 3 or 4 people, kind of an elder society, like how the Indians used to do it. Have a chief, but have a governing body that helps do the right thing. Make sure you guys are all working in tandem. That's kind of my philosophy. And so I like small groups. And when I say small groups, I mean less than 50. To me is manageable. But there's a lot of different schools of thought. I mean, there's some groups that are like, okay, we're this huge group, and we've got members in all these different areas. And so, if you're in that area, they've got your back, theoretically. But you got to be careful because a lot of those guys don't know what the crap they're doing.
Yeah, I think the first place we need to start when starting a group, a formal group, because I think we have a lot of informal groups that we just need to recognize. First of all, for like I mentioned, our families and the LDS community, our ward boundaries and state boundaries and so forth are kind of built-in groups, and that also already has a built-in purpose. That's really the key. Is when you're starting a group, is you need to determine what your purpose is of starting that group. And like I say, that's pretty easy within a family unit. And excuse me. Otherwise, I think it needs to be really well defined what that purpose is.
So it's just like starting a company. I mean, you've got to have your mission statement.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And it comes down to what's your purpose.
Here's a purpose.
Staying alive is a pretty good purpose.
Exactly.
But if there's not an organization, a program, if you don't subscribe to some type of organization for your group, it's going to abandon into chaos no matter what.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's just the nature of man. We like to fight for power. We like to do our own things. We get very put off when people tell us what to do. And so, especially in America, that's kind of a really big-time American trait. We don't drink the Kool-Aid most of the time.
And, I say, especially within families. I would say even within families that happens, but I think especially within families, we can have that conflict, and it can be more troublesome than otherwise, because you can just leave the group if you're in another group and it's not a family. You don't like what's going on, you can leave it and join another group. So I've got a little statement here that I found that I think is a great purpose. If you want to go ahead and read this,
sure.
Purpose for starting a group. So if you're starting a group that's maybe not necessarily family, or if it even is family, this is one statement I found I really liked. Here we go. To organize, make preparations, and conduct training to enable the provision of mutual assistance to fellow team members during times of emergency to ensure their survival of team members and their families. So I think if you're focusing on the group as, okay, I'm here to benefit the group, I think that's the wrong perspective.
Yeah, it can get dangerous.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Perfect. That's exactly where I'm going with that. It can get dangerous. But if we're there to focus, okay, I'm joining this group, our purpose, our family purpose in joining this group is to help our family survive, is to benefit our family, not to benefit the group.
That's right.
Right?
And I think that's one of the biggest challenges I have is a lot of the family members that I have made me the focal point
Yeah.
because of my skill sets, because of my knowledge. And the reality is if they don't fall in line when things happen, they're out of the group. I'm sorry, you're out of the group. If you're not helping out, if you're a hindrance, you're out of the group. And so I look for is people specifically outside of my family, kind of a band of brothers, brothers and sisters, people that I agree with that share similar traits but have different skill sets, that I know I can rely on, and I know that they've got knowledge and skills that I don't have. That's my key. That's what I look for. I'm not going to name any names, but I mean, there's a lot of different people that I've met over the years that if something happens, I know I can call on them, and they know they can call on me to help each other out, whether we're not in the same group or not, but we're supportive cohorts, I guess you could call it.
Yeah, so is there a benefit of actually having an organized group where you have, like you say, leadership formed, or is it kind of best as a family hierarchy in that the eldest, like the oldest brother or the father or the grandfather, however, kind of take
you're
over
leaning
that?
on the idea of a patriarchal order, right? A man-governed group, right? The oldest male of the first lineage.
Well, I just want to explore that idea. Is
Okay.
it best to kind of leave it to that, kind of like you say, like the Native Americans, kind of like it has been literally for centuries. That's the way people have survived.
Right.
In communities with their elders kind of being the leaders and not necessarily elected representatives or whatever taking the lead there.
Well, I don't think that would work if you pull it directly from out of our society. I think that would fall flat on its face. The reason why is because a lot of us don't like reporting to someone else, especially if we know that someone else is a complete pile of crap. Right.
We don't have respect for that.
I'm trying to
person,
pull my punches a little bit, but I'm trying also to be honest. A lot of us, if we were to look at that situation, we look at the eldest person in one of our families, we say, yeah, no way. Right? So being the oldest male in my family, I feel like I've done a pretty good job and understand things, but I can understand if my family's like, yeah, no way, because I can be a pain to live with. I can be a pain to work with, but I like things getting done. So for me, I trust myself and I know myself. And so my group is really more of my family group, but it's also a lot of in-laws and a lot of, different cousins and friends.
Me.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys are always like, John lives in the middle of nowhere up in Idaho, which is what I want to do. My wife's not ready yet. But if I'm ever up in Idaho, John's my guy.
You know where to go.
And I'll bring all my resources and I'll bring all my skills and I'm gonna have him put me to work. And I'll understand if that's where I am, John's my leader. It's his home, right? If the crap hits the fan and John's down here and he's like, dude, I'm gonna do everything I can to help him get home. But if he can't, he's in my group here.
Right. So is there the benefit of right now? Because obviously, things will fall into order if when it hits the fan, that those who are meant to take charge, whether they're elders in the family, will naturally take charge, or is it a good idea to start those plans now and say, okay, and start practicing putting those, whether it's once a month or once a quarter or whatever, and meeting as a group, but putting that group together now and establishing those, I guess, rules, whatever you want to call them.
Protocols and
protocols
kind
and
of a governing
and purposes and to do that now, or kind of wait till things start to get into chaos. Say, hey, we need to, we're already in chaos. Sorry, but go ahead, John.
I think you've got to start with the premise of groups are going to form one way or another.
Yeah.
And that's when you said things are going to fall into order. First, they're going to fall into disorder.
Yep.
And out of that, they fall into order, and that tribe, gang, group, whatever you want to call it,
team.
they're gonna fall
Can we
together.
call it clans? I like clans a lot better.
Clan, that's a
that
good word.
works.
I like
But we have to realize that I think that that's going to happen on all ends.
That's absolutely
People
true.
with ill intentions are going to fall together as well.
Absolutely. We'll be right back after this break. We're sponsored by Survival Medical, survivalmedical.com. You're listening to Prepper Talk Radio here on K-Talk AM 630. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Prepper Talk Radio on K-Talk AM 630. We're here every Wednesday from 9 to 10, and we're excited to be here. Thank you for listening and participating with us, and we're super excited to have our sponsor, John, here with Survival Medical. Talk about them a lot, talk about them every week. I've had to open up my kits, and I'm so glad that when I do, it's got the right stuff in there. It's been very thoughtfully put together. That's one of the best things about first aid is if you put together the right things, when the scenario comes, you've got the right tools to get through it.
And I think that's exactly the point of what we're talking about today is putting together the plan to have those tools already working, already in motion, instead of after it hits the fan that we scramble and try and make do.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is with groups, the big fly is, I'll just go join a group. A lot of people think they can just go join a group, and you'll find quickly the groups that already exist, and we talked about this a little bit on the break, the groups that already exist, depending on that group, there's going to be a lot of things you probably don't like about that group if you just try to go out and find one. Now, if you're trying to form one with people who you already have common bonds with and get along with well, I think you're going to be a lot more successful than going to try to find a group.
And if you live in an area where you don't have family and you're going to start a group, it's going to take a while to get to know those people of who you want in and who you don't. So if you're forced to, or compelled to do it under duress, then you're probably not going to have good results at the end.
Yeah.
Well, and if your criteria is just we're all preppers, and that's the only thing that brings you together, wow, that's a great way to get a strange
hodgepodge of
exactly. I mean, those personalities, those different beliefs, those aren't going to have. That's not going to have the core to hold you together in an emergency situation.
Yeah, I think that's key. You have to have a core. You have to have a common bond, a core. Be that familial ties, be that a code of conduct that you all subscribe to coming into it. That's the thing. It could be even just a scriptural or gospel focus. That core is the thing that's going to bind you. And if you're not all subscribing to it, you're going to fall apart very quickly. So finding a group, I'm always going to tell people if you're out looking for a group, you're doing it wrong. You should be working to create a group. People are going to join groups and leave groups all the time. That happens. But if you're all committed to the same thing, that group's going to be stronger. You're going to stand a better chance of getting through what's coming than if you're to just go looking for groups.
Yeah, now, I think the people who go looking for groups are the ones who are saying, "Oh, take care of me, protect me," rather than "I want to contribute."
And I think that's a huge problem.
Somewhat. I mean, I've definitely met really good people that were looking for that solution, and a lot of times I think they're in that early stage of prepper passion, right?
Okay.
And they feel that, I've got to do all of this now. I need to find a group now. And I think you see that more often than not. The word of wisdom I would add to that is, if you find a group, a lot of times these large groups are full of some interesting characters, and so you have to be careful when you're seeking it what you're actually going to find. Not to mention the size.
Right.
There's really not safety in a large group.
Right.
And the size of a group, it really is a key component as to how effective it is.
And location.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think one of the big things that people forget about with creating a group is they don't have rally points. They don't have a base of operations that's in a place that's easily defensible. That will produce water, that will produce food, that will produce resources. If you don't have those, then you have to go somewhere else to get those.
Yeah. Here's kind of a criteria I kind of personally came up with for the size of a group, because I think it absolutely depends on, like you say, location and such. So think of your family reunion. How big was your last family reunion? How many people were you able to get there? Was it 20, 30, 40, 50, 150? And at what point does that kind of break down and everybody start to do their own thing? And for me it's like, 50, that's a pretty big group. And I think in the past our family's done 100 plus people, but that's just it's chaos.
I think a group that size is going to become a target.
Yeah.
And I'm a Rawlesian. You've had me out here before.
Right,
I've really fallen into his camp. I believe James Wesley Rawls is an expert here in this field.
Survivalblog.com.
Exactly. Survival blog. Rawls is incredible. And I advocate his model of groups of eight male, so maybe 8 families, but interconnect with other groups, right? That's effective. You can effectively produce, you can effectively protect, you can effectively move. But if you have that communication with other like-minded, similar groups of that size, I think that's the ultimate model to create. But again, maybe it's different down here in an urban setting. I admittedly haven't thought about that setting like I'm sure you guys have.
Great.
And the keys that I take away from that is as a communication group, right? They've got resources that I don't have. It becomes more of an economic relationship than anything else. If something's happening, you can call on them for help. They can call on you for help. They can give you ideas. You can get tips, tricks, and all the other fun stuff from each other. I think that's the huge value in the small groups with large ties to other groups.
And I think there's obviously some dynamics there you have to work out in advance. So think of, this is what jumps out to me is, if you've got different groups, I think the natural inherent behaviors, they're going to compete with each other. They're going to want to compete. Oh, our group's better than your group, and have that kind of mentality. That may be a stumbling block.
It could be. This conversation just brings me back to Rawls' first book, Their Patriots, where you see this exact thing play out with a couple different groups. And in their first meeting, they're talking about their core beliefs to see if they're going to be competitors or if they can mutually aid one another. And again, that goes back to that plan that you guys were talking about. If they can stand there and clearly state, we're a patriotic group, we believe in the Constitution, we believe in liberty, we believe we're Christians, and we have these core things, then you can decide, this is a group that I want to benefit. We can work together. We have the same goal and intentions in mind.
I agree. The other challenge is, if you don't do this now, if you're not taking care of these types of things now, what's going to happen in the crisis? What kind of group are you going to be able to create? What kind of group are you going to have to join? And what are the challenges you're going to face?
And I like the ability to have some autonomy, to be kind of independent within a group. And that's kind of where I like this, the idea of the word community, is you have your little family group, and maybe this is kind of the same principle as having small groups and all tied in with other small groups, is say your family is you have your and I'm thinking more of an urban setting, in a subdivision where you have homes that are close by, not in a rural setting where you're really spread out away from lots of people, but having each family essentially responsible for their own needs, but then working together as a community. That's where I like that word, to satisfy the needs that we can't each take, we can't do for ourselves.
Which is a great model that Angry American in the Survivalist series, that's the same model that he presented, was everyone operated as a family, but yet the subdivision, in fact, worked together as a community to mutually benefit each other. What's interesting is he points out in his series the inherent flaws in that type of setting. Whether that be, you saw the separation of philosophical beliefs, you saw the separation of political beliefs, you saw this conflict of morals that happens, and I think that's one of the key things that has to be a part of the conversation when talking about groups, is the purpose of the group is something to be there when society and its laws disappear. And so the group has to have a set of morals that's going to guide it. It has to have some guiding principles. You also have to inherently recognize what other groups are going to form on the other side of that.
I mean, there are going to be marauding groups. There are going to be gangs and roving people who just intend to do bad. I mean, I meet those groups all the time online. I've met a few of them at events, and it's honestly a huge threat that people don't take seriously. I've got a good friend who's pretty high up in the military, was over at the CIA for a while, and he would go to gun shows in the South, and they would be selling off lists of groups that they'd find. They're like, these are targets. You can go after these guys. One of the largest target groups that he would tell me about is like the LDS Church. He goes, I don't subscribe to the church because then your information's shared with the entire ward congregation, and then everybody has that, and all somebody has to do is come visit once, get that form, figure out who all is in the ward, and now they have the name, phone number, and address of everybody that has or could have a year's supply of food. They become targets. Well, we live in a very target-rich environment here in Utah, but it's also, if we all are truly subscribing to the doctrine of the church, we're all going to come together when this happens, right? If we truly subscribe. We don't. That's the biggest problem. We don't as a community. We don't as a state. And so that becomes a big threat because there are people that are going to take advantage of that, both inside the church and out. You know, there are people that are going to be like, well, so-and-so's always been a jerk to my kids, but he's got food storage, so I'm going to go take it. You know, those are real, very real scenarios that can happen. Angry American, in his book, that's one of my favorite series, is his series. Also, G. Michael Hoff does the same thing in his post-apocalyptic novel series. Talks about the different types of groups and what can happen in those groups and kind of how those groups form out of necessity, that you end up with people after in a post-apocalyptic scenario, in a post-collapse scenario, groups kind of form, and you form based on needs, not based on a camaraderie, right? Not based on a kind of your own community rule of law.
Right.
And you get a lot more challenges that way than if you were to do it like Angry American. He kind of was prepping his neighbors in that series before something happened. And so he had those resources and those like-minded people ready to go. But then those people that weren't like-minded became problems. They were allowed to leave. When the option came to leave, a lot of them left. When another problem came up, there were actual physical conflicts in the series where people had to be killed because they were a huge danger to everyone else.
I think one of the most important things in a group is outlining authority, because that's what's going to fall apart. And I think that's what's one of my biggest concerns is, where are folks going to look for authority when a major event happens? Are they going to look to the military? Are they going to look to law enforcement? Are they going to look to their church leaders? And all of those have different pluses and minuses inherent with them. But I think that's one of the most important reasons to have that group is beforehand is establish this is our authority if this event happens.
I can see some obviously benefits to that, but I can also see how some would push against that and resist authority. So maybe that's, like you say, it's best to establish that up front and do it now and create that, I guess, hierarchy of respect. And I think that comes with, with experience, with the skill, with not what's just stuff that you have. Oh, he's got the most stuff, so he's the leader. That's not necessarily the case.
Interpersonal communication is going to become a lot more valuable in that scenario. Being able to talk and communicate and to convey trust, or to convey a clear message that this is a danger.
So we shouldn't be texting so much, right?
Well, I think that's one of the great things. Again, I go back to Rawls and his best group there in his series. You see there they have weekly councils, right, that have an established order. This person is heading the council, but we're all going to discuss it. This is the standard operating procedure of how we discuss things. This is how they get brought up. This is how they get settled. Having that kind of thing in place, it's like any other preparedness drill, whether it's stop, drop, and roll, or this is our plan if there's an earthquake. If we have a plan and we practice that plan beforehand, then when things are stressful, when we enter that environment, we can now do them in a more structured, thought-out, calm way. Without that, on the other hand, you're going to form a group based on survivability, not sustainability. One of the two is going to happen. There's not a third option. It's either going to form because, oh, wow, we have to group together and survive, or it'll be planned out and prepared beforehand, and this is what we're going to do to sustain. And those are two very different things.
And I love that, the word counsel, where you sit together and you counsel. That creates a lot of respect, a lot of validity to your efforts, instead of saying, oh, I'm the one making the decision. No, let's counsel together. Let's put this together beforehand and counsel before we make any, make sure everybody who's part of that group is on board.
Well, if it's allowed to happen correctly, that council is going to automatically create a charter. I mean, if you look at the history of civilization, almost every community that creates, they create based on a charter, common goals, common beliefs, common rules that they're going to abide by. Indian tribes, I mean, they had their councils, and they had, if someone did something against the tribe, they were dealt with. You look at the small towns when the United States started happening. You come out west, and all the little towns had a town charter, explaining here's what we're going to do, here's what we're not going to do. When Rome took over the world, they had their charter. We're going to come into this area. These are the rules you're now going to live by. That's Roman law. And those are the keys that I think a lot of us forget. Is we have to have the communication ability to vet each other out to make sure we're going to be, number one, all agree to the rules, but counsel to make those rules.
There's big power in doing that beforehand, too.
Absolutely.
In the reason of buying power, right? Think about this beforehand in a group. If you've already got a group together and you've got 8 families, let's say, since that's what we brought up earlier, and if those 8 families go together and make their food storage list, you realize how much money they're saving buying as a group as opposed to individually.
Yeah, absolutely.
If they went together and said, we're going to go to Survival Medical and we're going to buy the medical supplies for our 8 families at one time, I can tell you right now I'm giving them a big discount. If they're going and buying their ammunition together as a group, all of those things pull together as power. If they decide, hey, we're going to have this type of vehicle, so let's all stock this type of vehicle parts. We're going to carry this weapon, so let's all standardize these parts. Those plans, again, become extremely beneficial beforehand, just from a contingency standpoint.
It's very practical.
Supplies.
I mean, it's just a practical. And another part I wanted to kind of explore as we come up onto the music here. We'll do this after the break. But thanks for joining us. You're listening to Prepper Talk Radio here on AM 630 K-Talk. And our sponsor is Survival Medical, survival-medical.com. The only first aid kit designed to last up to 20 years for long-term storage.
Welcome back to Prepper Talk Radio. We are excited. We're here talking about prepper groups, creating groups. The importance of creating it now versus creating it later, right? That's kind of the focus we've been talking about. And as a reminder, we're brought to you by Survival Medical, the only first aid kit that's tougher than nature. It's going to outlast any of the other first aid kits out there. It's designed for long-term storage. Now, one of the keys to preparedness, everyone knows, okay, get my food storage. That's kind of a Utah staple, but that's not the first thing you need. The first thing you need is to have shelter. The second thing you need is to have water. The third thing you need is your food. As far as resources go, tangibles. The thing that I think is most important is setting up your group. And I think one of the things that we really need to focus on is how do we do that, especially if your group's going to be family. How do you approach that conversation? How do you get started? And if it's not your family and it's friends, like-minded friends, you still need to have that conversation. You still need to approach that and get everybody on the same page, whatever that page looks like. And I can't tell you exactly what it needs to look like because it's different for every group. Every group's going to have different dynamics. But how do you approach that with your family or with your potential group?
There needs to be some level of organization or mutual understanding, whether it's a formal organization of a group. Like we're talking here, I've met some resistance, in trying to get something going within my own family. And I know you mentioned that as well, Scott. And so, how do we do that as delicately and as simply and as what's the right word? As pure, keep it as pure and as I don't know the right word, as possible, so that we're not like you're saying, John. We're not perceived as being psycho and wacko. Oh, everything is fine and dandy, but you're over here and trying to create a group of for a post-apocalyptic scenario.
I think the biggest challenge there is the filtering process of doing that. You can't just start the conversation with, hey, I got a group, let's come together and talk about it. Because then now you've invited someone in before really realizing necessarily where they stand, how they're going to feel about that. By the time you get to that conversation of, hey, we're forming a group, you need to really know an individual and understand their loyalty and dedication to such a thing.
Yeah, I think the idea is that, okay, people come to you. You're not out there digging in and trying to find people that you're creating an environment where people want to come to you and be a part of what you have going on. So in relating to how that relates with your family, I'm still working on that. I'm still trying to figure that out. I do have some members, some brothers that are totally on board. They get it, and others that are completely opposite and don't. And I'm trying to bring them in as gently as possible.
Well, I think that conversation comes back to motivation, right? Anyone will do something if properly motivated. So I think the first step in that conversation of building that group is not, hey, I have a group. It's, this is why a group would be a good idea theoretically.
Right.
Let's talk about a theoretical possibility first, and then once we weed out who we want there, then we can have a more concrete conversation. But I think that starts with the acceptance that large groups that we now look to as leadership may not exist, or if they do exist, they may not lead us where we really want to be led.
Right.
There's groups right now that I think fondly of, that I worry what decisions will be made when it comes down to serious situations like we talk about.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is, okay, we go back on Shane's point, talking to family or talking to that group. I mean, you really got to start with the kid gloves on and kind of gauge where everybody is, and then start speaking from a point of where the I guess the least prepared person is in that group, or the least open person in the group. We've tried to do family MLDS, so we do family home evening, right? And sometimes we'll do it with our big family in-laws, and we've tried to do lessons on preparedness and the importance of preparedness, because that's where some people are. They're not past that, hey, I need to get prepared, even though they've been preached that their entire lives, and their parents are super into it. Some of the kids are like, I'm good. What are you talking about? This is stupid. Why are we even
I just
talking
bought a new
about
iPad.
this?
Well, that goes back to that motivation.
Yeah. And so from there, I've then found, okay, these are the members of the family that are ready versus these are the members of the family that are clearly not ready and don't have a clue. And so for my wife and I, it's been here's quite small conversational points that we'll bring up. So when we are buying more food storage, we're like, hey guys, we're buying this food storage. Anybody else want to get in on this buy? Which is the bulk purchase value, right? And it's funny because like, oh no, we really need to get food storage, but we're not ready yet. Let me go buy a new Honda. Oh, we need a new computer, or it's funny because people prioritize what they think is most important.
On that newest 4K TV.
Yeah, and the sad fact is those things won't feed them when crap happens. They need to at least do a little bit. And so that's why we do this radio show. That's why I started PrepperCon, is to help people realize that I can do a little bit, and that little bit goes a long way. And that's the starting point. You don't have to jump from one end of the spectrum of I have no idea what to do to I'm wearing a tinfoil hat on the other end of the spectrum. You don't have to jump that whole thing. I don't ever want to be the tinfoil hat guy. I want to be in that kind of the 70 to 80% threshold between the 0 to 100 on prepping. I think that's kind of the broad spectrum. That's kind of the place for me to be. That's where I'm comfortable, where I can still have a normal life, which you should always have a normal life, whatever normal is.
Like we
whatever
talked
that
about
means to
last
you.
week, quality of life.
Yeah, quality of life, and have the ability to get myself prepared and not be tied down by unnecessary bills or having to keep up with the Joneses, lifestyle. Because what's more important to me is having resources and being able to be of assistance when the crap hits the fan, rather than be a hindrance.
Well, that shows your core value, and it goes back to that common principle of who you would want in your group. That tells me if you're that person that's more interested in the big screen or the newest thing or the biggest toy, your core value is not your family. And if your core value is not your family, I don't want you in my group, because I don't know what decisions you're going to make in a stressful situation if that's not your core value. And it's important to use observations like that to help filter out who you want to have that conversation with.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Understanding that person is not as hard as we think it is. We think it's so hard to understand each other. It's really just observing and the lost art of listening. People don't listen to each other anymore. We talk at each other. We don't talk to each other. And that's one of the things I love about K-Talk is this is an opportunity for us to talk with each other, talk to each other, talk about things that actually matter, focus on key things that can change our lives and improve our lives. So I look at it this way, when you're talking to friends, when you're talking to family, when you're creating your group, be open, put your devices away, focus on each other, focus on the conversations, because these are the conversations that can save your life later or will hinder you in those challenging times come.
Put your devices away. I love that you said that. The ability to be present is an incredible survival skill.
Yes.
And on the other end of that, the need to not be present is a dangerous skill. And those daggum devices is the biggest drug, I think, in the history
you're right.
of mankind when it comes to distracting us from being present. What a disconnect and what a dangerous thing. And I seriously wonder how much that's affected the community of preparedness over the last decade.
But it can also be a big a positive tool if used properly. I mean, obviously, I mean it's a double-edged sword. You know, we're so connected, yet we're so disconnected at the same time. It's quite the conundrum.
I think that's the key. Is we are right next to each other, but miles apart. This technology, which was professed to be the be-all, end-all of communication to keep us closer together. You know, AT&T used to say, reach out and touch someone, right? You know, you wanted that connection. You wanted that. But now we've got so much connection that's in our face that we've pushed everyone away.
It's been redefined.
So that we can see the connection and not actually communicate.
Exactly. The word connection has been redefined for us. Connection, like reach out and touch someone, like I'm putting my hand on John's shoulder here. That's why I loved having him in studio rather than on the phone, is having that personal connection, not actually reach out and touch someone, not just touch them with your voice, but, you know, put your hand on their shoulder.
Well, touch it's more about connecting, right? Connecting with the people. And that's what your group needs to do, is if you're not connecting and if you're not communicating and if you don't know how to handle tough topics, you're going to struggle.
Yeah.
You're going to ultimately fail if you cannot handle tough topics and actually listen. I had a coach in wrestling that always yell at us, you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, and you can only shut one of them. So listen. And then I had another guy that was a sales manager. He's like, you got 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them proportionally. You know, and it's just like those key principles that our grandparents lived on every day, we have totally forgotten and just kind of brushed aside as a society. Maybe not as individually, but as a society. And so when it comes to having these tough conversations, when it comes to forming your group, creating your charter, you've got to spend more time listening and listening to understand instead of listening to respond.
So to summarize where we've come from this, I'm realizing what we've learned here in 40 minutes of conversation. We've talked about identifying core values and then learning to communicate. I think that's interesting, the power in just those 2 things. Just doing those 2 things, the survivability level has gone through the roof just by doing those 2 things, filtering out those that don't have that common core. And then once you do have that common core in place, learning to communicate to each other, because ultimately, whether you're talking to someone that's survivalist trained or military trained, communication is key to surviving anything. Especially when you're talking about a stressful situation, that communication has to be there, whether that's established beforehand by, hey, this is our procedures, or whether that's there just via trust from those councils that you sit down and you know you can communicate with each other. One way or another, that has to be there.
Defining the purpose of the group, so that everyone is on the, like you say, is on the same page. I think that is one of the core principles, like you're saying, is defining that purpose so that when it comes down to the hard decisions, you can look back to that purpose. Okay, why did we start this group in the first place? It's not. It is kind of a selfish reason we're starting this group, is so that we can all eventually survive. I mean, whatever that purpose is.
Well, the goal isn't just to survive, right? Surviving sucks. Let's be honest. Surviving sucks. Anyone who's gone through a really rough thing, they call them a survivor, right? The goal isn't to just survive. The goal is to thrive. The goal is to still have some comforts or to create new comforts, because you're going to create a whole new normal. And if you're doing that with a group and you're creating a new normal and you've got the ability to have some fun in the mix, that's going to change the entire mindset of the group. I mean, the pioneers, as they came across, you know, their leaders were told to make sure they do something fun every once in a while. So they'd have a little makeshift dance on a Friday night. In the middle of the sticks, in the middle of the woods, they'd put up a bonfire, and they're like, you know what, today we're going to actually do something fun.
It's my kind of party.
Yeah.
You need that, though.
Now
we as
imagine
people need that.
imagine if a particular family member who is part of this group had a catastrophic event happen in their life, which happens regularly. I mean, whatever it might be, cancer or their home was destroyed by fire or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
That organization is already in place to take care of them immediately if it's done properly. So in a everyday scenario, not just a post-apocalyptic scenario, having a group, a team. I like the word team. I like community. I like team. Having a group that is mutually beneficial to everyone has a lot more purposes or reasons to get prepared right now than just for that day when the S hits the fan.
Exactly. I mean, you're going to be able to, for example, joblessness, or there's a house fire. For example, one of my friends, his brother had a house fire, destroyed everything. They had 14 kids. All 14 kids are adopted. All of them are under the age of 16, and they lost everything while they were at church. A hot plate was left on, caught something on fire, burned the whole interior of the house. They lost everything. And quickly, very quickly, the community of their friends, including myself, came together with resources to help get them resettled. Sometimes those resources are money. Sometimes those resources are time and availability. Sometimes they're tools. Sometimes they're actual clothing and food. It doesn't really matter. What matters is you've got that network of people that can come together and help out in a crisis. It doesn't have to be an apocalyptic scenario, people. Yeah. You need people you can work with and trust to come together. And I look at the example, my good friend Alma, you guys all know him really well. He lives up in Idaho. Then they had fires going on up there, and all the farmers in that area got together and they'd knock it out one area at a time, and they just took out and created a whole fire line to protect the city. That's why you need to have good communication. And we're out of time. I want to thank John with Survival Medical for being here today. You've been listening to Prepper Talk Radio here on K-Talk AM 630. We'll be back next week, Wednesdays, 9 to 10, every week. Thanks for tuning in.